Okay, then let's start the class. What we are going to discuss today is, we are going to continue that lesson, and the topic for today is likha functional aspect of ecosystem. So, functional aspect of ecosystem mane, looking at the heading itself, I think we understand what we are going to discuss today is the function of a ecosystem, right. Whenever we talk about the function of a ecosystem, what is the function of a ecosystem? Functions ki? Or what are the functions of a ecosystem? Remember in the very first class when we have started this chapter, we have written something. We have written 3 to 4 points regarding functions of the ecosystem. Porha nai ne pahorilu ne ki hol? At least turn the pages and see if you brought the notes. Ne notes hu ana nai. Functions of a ecosystem ki asile? The most important function, decomposition. Second, nutrient cycling, right? Next, productivity. Next, energy flow. So, these are what is called as the functions of an ecosystem. So, this is something that we are going to discuss. So, we are going to talk about 3 of them. We are going to talk about, first is something called as productivity, second decomposition, and third nutrient cycling, right. So, 18 ta function hai ami details out korim. So, today the heading would be productivity. So, functional aspect of ecosystem boli heading kori pelai likha aso. হ'ব চাগে right. So, these are certain functions of an ecosystem. We will start with a word called as productivity. So, heading koriba productivity. Okay. Now, talking about productivity, what we understand by the word, or what is the meaning of productivity? To produce something is called as productivity, and whenever we talk about this word, generally produced by productivity, a words to which component of the ecosystem is it related with? Generally, we have a tendency to believe that productivity word to hunile, we think it's as if we are talking only about the producers, right? Because we know why are these plants or these green plants called as producers? Because they produce something, and if they produce something, then we can also have a term called as productivity. But the point to be to study over here is productivity is something not only related with the producers but also related with the consumers. So, kiman produce korise, right? Green plants produces. This is something that we know. But as far as consumers are concerned, consumers also produce. If you remember, we have talked about the different types of consumers: primary, secondary, tertiary, etc. So, if you are talking about a primary consumer, who is the producer for the primary consumer? It is the green plants. If you are talking about the secondary consumer, who is the producer for the secondary consumer? It's obviously the primary consumer. So, what we understand, the productivity hok ba production or kothai hok, it's not only related with producers but also with consumers. So, similarly, we have 2 types of productivity, productivity 1 and productivity 2, right? Primary productivity and secondary productivity. Productivity 1 is equal to primary productivity, productivity 2 is equal to secondary productivity. Next point, primary productivity is something that is related with the producers. As far as productivity of consumers is concerned, takami ki boli kaun secondary productivity. So, these are the 2 words: primary productivity, producers; secondary productivity, consumers. Again, when we are discussing about production, productivity, we use 2 words that is called as net and gross. Right? We have something called as gross productivity, we have something called as net productivity, right? Now, what is the difference between gross and net? Not only in terms of productivity, because we have not yet started the word called as productivity, but I think you all have heard this word. Have you heard the word called as gross salary and net salary? কোম্পানী এটা জইন কৰা বা ক'ৰবাত জইন কৰাৰ পিছত কি থাকে গ্ৰছ স্যালাৰি এণ্ড নেট স্যালাৰি হোৱাট ইজ দ্য ডিফাৰেন্স whatever the company provides you or promises to give that is what is called as gross whatever you take home is called as net right means what so kati kuti so kharos korar pisot ultimately jikini hatot take in hand juntu take that is what is called as net similarly if you are talking about production if you are talking about productivity the total amount that is produced and what amount is it stored right the total is called as gross and the amount that is stored within the body of an organism that is called as net so if we are talking about productivity in case of producers or we are talking about primary productivity will also have gross primary productivity and net primary productivity what is gross primary productivity the amount that is produced by the green plants the total amount that is produced but whatever is the total amount it is not like this that the entire amount gets stored inside the cell of the plant obviously they use certain parts in various metabolic activities after losing some amount the amount that is stored inside that is called as net is the two concept clear gross and net so similarly primary productivity to ki thakibo gross aru net thakibo secondary productivity to ki thakibo gross aru net thakibo what is gross the total amount what is net the ultimate product that you have inside that is what is called as net next again let's understand the concept and then we'll start writing the notes okay iman tane kuno hoy okay talking about primary productivity the first thing that we know that it is something related with producers so what we are talking about is the total amount that is produced by the green plants is called as primary productivity if we are talking about the total amount what exactly we are talking about is nothing but photosynthesis right plants bilake produce kore ki produce kore obviously food produce kore so if you are talking about preparation of food production of food the process that we are concerned with is obviously key photosynthesis so primary productivity depends on what it depends on the rate of photosynthesis of the green plants right again rate of photosynthesis in a green plant depends on what edal plant e কি produce koribo food produce koribo jiman produce kore tak ami ki buli kom productivity buli kom hey productivity factor to kihor upor edal plant e besike khwa bostu produce korise edal plant e kom ke khwa bostu produce korise hey je eta je besi hol eta kom hol it depends on what in other words productivity in case of green plants depends on the answer could be like you can give it very precisely or you can give it in a broader sense also the answer to this question is raw materials for photosynthesis obviously because we are concerned with photosynthesis the question is photosynthesis ketia besi hobo jetia raw materials proper thakibo talking about the raw materials of photosynthesis from your class 11 portion raw materials ki asile 5 almost sunlight asile carbon dioxide the pigment asile the house that is called as chloroplast etc so we are not going to go much in details over here what we will study is the amount that is produced because of photosynthesis is called as productivity in case of green plants this productivity depends on what this productivity depends on the amount of sunlight that the plant takes in right out of all the raw materials we are concerned with just the energy here and so we'll be confined with the word intake of sunlight jiman sunlight lobo himan produce koribo jedi komke loise komke produce koribo right similarly if you are talking about consumer level I have already said that we can use the word productivity also in case of consumers green plants or productivity kihor upor depend kore it depends on the sunlight thik teneke in case of consumers productivity kihor upor depend koribo green plants e produce kore right kihor upor depend kore sunlight er upor jiman sunlight lobo himan produce koribo consumers or logoto productivity use hoy ase word to consumers can also produce so the amount that the consumer can produce depends on what the first thing is consumer e kar karone produce koribo if you are talking about primary consumer they will produce for the secondary consumer if you are talking about secondary consumer they will produce for the tertiary consumer the point is this amount of production of the consumer depends on which factor depends on how much they have eaten green plants e energy kiman loise photosynthesis himan hoise consumers bilake khaise for example in case of human beings also if you are talking about the amount of energy that we have ami jiman kham himan energy hobo right? So producers or kihor upor depend kore sunlight, consumers or kihor upor depend kore the amount they are having it, ingestion, right? Okay. So note to likho, heading koriba productivity. Definition, the amount but the rate of synthesis of organic matter or biomass produced at any trophic level during a given period of time. So this is how the definition goes. Next, productivity is measured as right. So what is productivity? The amount that is produced is called as productivity. How can you measure what is the amount that is produced? Either you can measure it in terms of weight, or you can measure in terms of energy. If you measure, biomass, pyramid of biomass, biomass, ekdam very simple meaning, we are talking about the weight, right? Biomass of an organism, the weight of an organism. Okay. Next is another point that you have to know is talking about productivity in any trophic level or in any organism. Productivity ki hoy according to area, according to the time of season, or according to the different habitats, according to the different ecosystem. Productivity ki hoy vary kore. Not necessarily in each and every ecosystem, in each and every season, so bore productivity constant thake, right? So we have to talk something called as variation in productivity. So next heading kora, variation in productivity. So productivity in terms of primary productivity we are talking about the amount that is produced by the green plant. So can you give me an example of our ecosystem where the productivity would be very, very less or very least? Obviously a desert, right? If you are talking about a grassland, productivity besi hobo. If you are talking about a desert, productivity kom hobo. So we understand that productivity is not constant, it might keep on varying, right? And yar bitor kiya hai, highest productivity kot thake. Out of this corollary for both question ahe, theek ase? So number 1 is important. Highest productivity. Next likhiba types of productivity. 2 types, primary and secondary. I think this is over. Naihwa? Explanation we have already done. We have understood the terms also. Now we are going to write the note. Right? P1. Our secondary productivity denoted as P2. Flies more common in summer than winter. That's a heading koriba, primary productivity. What is primary productivity? Amount of organic matter produced by a producer is called as primary productivity. তাৰপিছত gross primary productivity heading কৰিবা. So the total amount of food that is produced by the green plants would be called as gross. The entire food, the entire energy that is obtained from the food does not remain in the plant body. Some of the energy is obviously wasted, some of them is lost, some of them has been used for the various metabolic process like respiration, etc. So tar pisot jiman ki thake tak ami ki kom net kom no. So heading koriba gross primary productivity. Thik ase apo likhi loa. Gross primary productivity আৰু এটা বস্তু লিখাছোন write this also GPP or PG, right? Productivity gross. Similarly, NPP, PN, right? Next, gross primary productivity, I mean, like him. হৈছে নে মুছিব পাৰিম নে ওকে As far as the definition of GPP is concerned, primary productivity junto definition asile hetue ki hobo, it's the same thing, it's nothing but the amount of food that is prepared inside the plant. It is nothing but photosynthesis. It could be also be called as gross photosynthesis or it could be called as total photosynthesis. So yatke besi I don't think we need to write aru definition to nalage. I think it's understood, no? Productivity ki hoy, the amount that is produced. Primary productivity related with what? The producers. In case of producers, productivity is of two types, gross and net. What is gross? The total amount of photosynthesis is called as gross. আৰু এটা পইণ্ট লিখাচোন ইয়াতে we know the energy that is produced is obviously used So NPP can also be written as so out of the entire thing that we have written, only 3 points are important. What is important? Obviously this one, right? NPP is equal to GPP plus RNA, GPP minus R, etc., etc. That is important. Next, the word stored and agortut ki asile produced, right? So just the 3 words, the equation, the word stored and the word produced. The amount of organic matter that is produced, that is called as gross. The amount that is stored, that is called as net. So this was in terms of in terms of producers. So this was primary productivity. If this is over, secondary productivity heading koriba. In animals also, energy is partly used and partly stored. Exact the same sentence that we have studied in case of plants. So what we understand that GPP and NPP would also be present in case of secondary productivity also, right? Primary productivity jeneke NPP aru GPP asile, thik teneke secondary productivity to ki thakibo NPP aru GPP thakibo. We don't have to write in details about this. Just this line is sufficient. Primary productivity is the amount that is produced at which trophic level? Producers, but T1, right? Secondary productivity, kuntu trophic level logot associated. It cannot be only T2, no? Except T1, because we are talking about what? Primary, secondary and tertiary consumers, right? So, eto kihor logot relate hoi rakibo? Producers বা green plants বা T1 or bahire jiman bilak ase, so trophic level would be included in secondary productivity. Kinte okol T1 code include hoi rakibo primary productivity. Is it understood? Okay. Okay. Next likha ecological efficiency. So when we are using the word efficiency or we are using the word ecological efficiency, so ecological efficiency, obviously this is something that is related with productivity, right? Efficiency, what do you use korile? How will you know whether how much efficient an organism is? Keneke gom paba? Eta organism kiman efficient? Keneke janiba when you start measuring it? Right? You have to measure it in terms of something, then only you will understand. Eta human being kiman efficient, you have to test it. right? So whenever we are using the word efficiency, so what we understand, we are talking about the transfer of energy from one trophic level to the other trophic level. We know the green plants produce the food. Food khini je produce korise, hey food khini ki hoy? What happens to the food that is produced inside the green plant? After photosynthesis hoy thake, tar logete to aru eta metabolic process hoy thake, no? Hey food to ki hoy? Hey starch to ki hoy? Obviously breakdown. What happens to the food that we eat? Breakdown hoy, right? Breakdown hoy pele ki form kore? Energy. So ultimately gutekhini energy related no hoy jano. Plants bilake je produce korise, exactly what they are doing, producing energy, right? Consumers are eating the producers, exactly what they are having is the energy that is stored inside the plant. Primary consumers are eaten by the secondary consumers. So secondary consumers ki paise? The energy that is present in the primary consumer. So ecological efficiency tells us about what? The energy that is transferred from one trophic level to the other trophic level. Producer pra primarily kiman energy goise. And what we do, we have already talked about what? Loss of energy at each trophic level. I think you remember something called as 10% law of Linderman. We have studied that, no? Hey karne ki koisilu je trophic level eta food chain on, not more than 4 or 5. I think you remember we have studied in the class, no? What is the number of trophic level that you see in case of a food chain? 4 or 5. In very highly complicated we see 5, right? But not 7, 8, 9, 10 like that, right? What is the reason behind? Because of the loss of energy. Because the more higher you go, the lesser amount of energy is left. Aru eta organism or jodi energy sobotse kom ase tak khai pelai ki lav hobo, right? If our organism belongs to the top trophic level, if someone is going to have that one, in terms of energy, ki pabo? Negligible, right? Sorry. So since we know both producers and consumers, for both of them we relate something that is called as productivity. So we have to see producers kiman efficient, consumers kiman efficient, right? So efficiency measures of producers means the amount of energy that is produced in the producer. Efficiency measure of consumer talks about energy that is stored inside the consumer, right? Right? Again, since we are using the word producers, what is the amount that they produce depends on what? Photosynthesis. So photosynthetic efficiency ami keneke ulam? Eta producer or kiman produce korise depends on what? Say ami keneke gom pam je cell to bitor kiman food ase, kiman energy ase, no? This is something that is called as GPP. What is the amount they produce depends on what? The amount of sunlight they have taken, right? So tolot likha. Incident total solar radiation means the amount of sunlight that they have taken. What is the total they have produced? What is the amount that is left with? Anything you did not understand? Ecological efficiency is the percentage of energy. Ecological efficiency could be calculated both in case of producers and also in case of consumers. How will you calculate? By this two. Either you will talk about the total amount of food or energy because of photosynthesis or the amount that is stored after utilization. If we are talking about this, net, because we have something called as NPP, and what is NPP we already understood, no? So, right? So, I think it's over. Nothing in details. Take as a maximum question that this formula could be given, and then you would be asked to choose the correct option. Nothing in details, no calculations, nothing. Next, efficiency measures for consumers. So, if you are talking about the efficiency measures of consumers, or we are talking about the energy that is produced or stored inside the consumer, this time we are not going to separate it under the heading GPP and NPP. Eta logote ami koi dim. Thik ase jeneke producers or logot we have used a word called as production. No, what is the amount of sunlight they have taken? Yate ki hobo, what is the energy that they have? Means what? We talk about something called as assimilation. I think we understand what assimilation is, no? To be kiman loi kiman rakhisa, that is what is called as assimilation. So, this could also be called as food energy assimilated. Depends on what? Since we are talking about efficiency as a percentage, so obviously 100 re multiply koribo lagibo. Definition to ki asile percentage of energy, right? So, in case of consumers, we use a word that is called as assimilation. So, ultimately ecological efficiency could be written like this also. What we know, it is nothing but a calculation of energy in terms of percentage. What we are comparing is the amount of energy that is present in the trophic level. What you are comparing? agote kiman asil etia kiman ase. You are comparing the lower trophic level and you are comparing the higher trophic level. So we have talked about this word called as previous trophic level, right? So this is all that you have to know about productivity. Nothing in details, not very important also, or iman questions hu aha nai. Yes, kintu tothapi janibo lagibo maximum question has been asked about what is NPP and what is GPP. Ar tatkeo sobotse beshi question NPP is equal to GPP minus R, right? Ar tatkeo beshi jodi question ahibo pare, the chances are they will ask primary productivity is related with, secondary productivity is related with, primary productivity related with producers, secondary productivity related with consumers, right? So talking about functional aspects of the ecosystem or ecological functions, the first function we have discussed, we will be going to the next function heading koriba decomposition. Is this over? Over? Second likha number 2, productivity was number 1, number 2 likha decomposition. Okay, so this is something that we know. So ekhini portion ami ji porhi asu no, it's nothing very rocket science or something like that. No, it's something that is GK based. Everyone has an idea. Whenever we talk about decomposition, we know the process, right? So what are the things that we are going to study over here is first certain words called decay, decomposition we understand. Next a word called as detritivores, a word called as detritus. What is detritus? Jikhini organisms, jikhini bostu decomposed hoy tak ami ki boli kau detritus. Decomposition is carried by, it's carried by the microorganisms. Microorganisms are also called as detritivores. Next we have to talk about the site for decomposition. Whenever we talk about decomposition, we understand it's something that occurs after the death of the organism, right? Okay, from biological classification point, do you remember the name of the organism that could decompose standing trees? Normally decomposition kar hoy? Their organisms? Kintu a point to porhaisile mon ase na okoman mon ase na fungi, ganoderma, right? So just go back to those notes. It's not like this that they will ask the decomposition kar hoy. It's obviously known that their organisms undergo decomposition, but a particular type of fungi that can cause decomposition in case of standing trees also. Standing trees refers to what? The living tree itself, right? So for fungi be like they are the best decomposers. So one example of a fungi. Okay, coming back to this again. So we have to talk about the site of decomposition. Where does decomposition take place? What is the answer? Decomposition kot hoy. Decomposition is a process of breaking down. Where does decomposition take place? Kot hoy. Kot hobo. Air, water. You cannot be giving a proper answer for this because to give this answer you have to know which type of a decomposition you are talking about. Either you are talking about a decomposition related with the terrestrial area or you are talking about a decomposition related with water bodies. So in both the cases, decomposition site to beleg. If you are talking about terrestrial, right, or you are talking about land, soil, etc., decomposition kot hoy? Obviously soil ote hobo nohale ki botahot hobo niki? Soil ote hobo. Soil or jodi ami hudhu je terrestrial area boli kole soil is an example, right? Soil or decomposition kot hoy? Kot ba hoy? Remember something called as soil profile, right? So soil profile ki asile? A type of a soil divided into certain horizons or layers. What were the horizons? A1, A2, A3 and A4. Specific point about A1, A2, A1, sorry, not A1, A2, I'm so sorry. A, B, C and D, there were 4 horizons, no? A horizon again had A1, A2, A3, B also had B1, B2, B3, but iman details not important. What is important is A, B, C and D. One statement about each horizon. Unique point about A horizon, duta word, humus or litter, right? B horizon, mineral deposition. C horizon, water table. If you have to take out water, no, if you have to dug a well, kiman loke khandiba. It's always still a C horizon, right? That talks about the water table. And coming to the last layer, that is the D horizon, parent bedrock, right? Birat dangor rocks bilak ase. So these are the 4 lines that you remember. Coming back to soil profile, so we understand the uppermost layer is called as what? A horizon. So decomposition kot hobo. Obviously A horizon at hobo, and to be precise, it is always in A1. According to some books, A0 buli diya ase, right? You have to see the option. Topmost layer, if it is denoted by A1, the answer would be A1. If it is denoted by A0, the answer would be A0. According to the question, you have to answer this, right? But as of now, what we know, if you are talking about soil or land or terrestrial, decomposition kot hobo always on the topmost layer. Now, coming to the area of decomposition in case of an aquatic body, at a lake, at a pond, at a sea, at a river, whatever, right? Decomposition to obviously hobo, that living organisms are said. So decomposition kot hobo. Is it on the top layer? Is it on the surface of the water? No. Kot hobo, ekdom tolot. And that ekdom tolot word to ki buli koi? The benthic zone, right? Remember we have talked about in organisms and population. Ki koisil no? Stratification, no, light zonation, I think we have studied that, right? So we have the last layer, enuka eta diagram akisilu no? Something like this, right? Eta pani asile, last layer, sun asile, limnatic, littoral, profundal and benthic. The last layer, this is called as ki? Benthic zone, no? What was so special about benthic zone? No light, so producers present ne absent? Absent, te ki thake? Microorganisms. So jote microorganisms thakibo tate decomposition hobo. So aquatic body at a decomposition kot hoy lowermost level, that is called as the benthic zone. Terrestrial kot hoy uppermost, that is the A horizon, right? Okay. Next is what we have said. What is decomposition? You have to study. You have to talk about those words: decay, putrefaction, etc. Third is site of decomposition. Fourth is rate of decomposition. We know all the substances do not decompose at the same rate. Kisman postu sonkale decompose hoy, kisman deri ke decompose hoy. One example, kwa jontu niki deri ke decompose hoy. Anything that has organic matter, especially in case of carbohydrates, easily decomposed, right? So if you are talking about keratin, if you are talking about cellulose, if you are talking about a cell wall with silica, that ki hobo, heblak decomposition low hobo. So you have to read something called as highly decomposed, rapidly decomposed or slowly decomposed substances, right? Next is the process of decomposition. What exactly happens in decomposition? We know it breaks down. What breaks down? The organism breaks down, right? The dead organism breaks down. Breaks down into what? Into 2 parts, that is organic and inorganic part. What happens to the inorganic part? It mixes with the soil and the plants can take in again. What happens to the organic part? Some amount of it is used by the microorganisms as food. So this is what we have to study, right? And ekdom last or decomposition or ki poribo laibo, factors affecting decomposition. If you talk about factors affecting decomposition, I think you all have seen the process of decomposition or the rate of decomposition depends on season also. Jikono eta sabji, pasoli, sonkale decompose ketia hobo? Goromor dinot is always in the summer days that the decomposition is faster. That is the reason why we put the substances inside the fridge, right? So lower climate but lower temperature, decomposition less. Coming to moisture, basic moisture thakile decomposition hobo ne kom ke moisture thakile decomposition hobo? Obviously basic moisture thakile rainy days of decomposition besi hoy. Fridge tut ki hoy? Kyo no hoy? Tato bahut moisture ase. Temperature to komi ase. So we cannot be concluding by a single statement that whenever there is more moisture, decomposition is fast. There are always exceptions. And what is the exception? Obviously the refrigerator. Okay. So this is the content that we will study. It's almost like a story. It's important no, and it's not tough also. Kinu likhim notes, likha aro. Likha breaking down of a substance, decomposition. অৰ্গেনিক ইনঅৰ্গেনিক হৈছিলে নাই? এইটো হৈছে না, এইখিনি নুমুচো। is this part over? এইখিনি লিখা হ'ল সবৰে? এইখিনি নহয়, এইটো part. So if you are talking about the mechanism of decomposition, we see mainly 3 steps, but as a whole, if you want to sum it up, there are 2 more steps. Normally we talk about these 3 steps. I think it's well understood, no? First it will get broken down into fragments, and then that is leaching. What is leaching? Percolation of the minerals into the deeper layer of soil because of gravity along with the water, that is called as leaching. We know decomposition occurs in the upper layer. From the upper layer, the substances has to go down, right? Against what? Sorry, because of what? Because of gravity, right? That is what is called as leaching. And catabolism, the normal anabolic reaction, catabolic reaction, we understand the normal breaking down reactions that occur. I think it's understood, no? Nothing to explain. Buji to say. Fragmentation, leaching, aru catabolism. बढ़िया. It's you. कौन कर रहा है? कौन कर रहा है? पता नहीं है. Then you are doing it. वो जो ओके, वो जो आवाज़ आ रही है.
वो बातचीत का.
नहीं. कुछ. नहीं ना. I know. You have levels like you do this, you don't do that. हाँ, वो तो लाइक मुझे दिखाई नहीं दे रहा है, लेकिन उसके ऊपर आप क्या कर रहे हो? मे बी यू आर मेकिंग अ साउंड. नहीं ना, पीछे वाला. ओके, सो सॉरी ना. या ओके, ओवर. मुझे क्यों लगता है कि हमेशा क्लास में तुम ही करते हो? ओके, आई थिंक इट्स ओवर. नहीं हुआ? So, process is conducted by 3 steps, right? Hey, tinta to koilwe. Apart from those 3, these words are also related with the process of decomposition. Humidification, as the name suggests, we are talking about what? Production of humus. Humus ketia producer, decomposition of KRNA to humus producer, right? So, along with decomposition ki hoy, humidification occurs, right? Second is mineralization. We are talking about formation of the different minerals in the soil. Soil of minerals bilak kor pra ahibo, obviously decomposition of KRNA ahibo. So, along with those 3 steps, this too also occurs during the process of decomposition. So, heading koriba humidification. So, what is humidification? Formation of humus. So ultimately decomposition can be denoted as etu likhi loa last So this is what exactly happens during the process of decomposition, right? Not only the three process, no, fragmentation, leaching and catabolism, but we understand that environment also plays a major role in the process of decomposition, and together with that we have humidification and mineralization also. So this is about the process. Next heading koriba factors affecting decomposition. Factors affecting decomposition, if suppose if you have got the PDF, it's written there, kintu bhalke systematically likha nai. So if you want to write it down, you can write it down, or you can see it from the PDF also, right? Chekora. Is it over? Okay. Next likha factors affecting decomposition. Okay, before writing that, one word that we have written a word called as gravitational water. Likhisilu ne olop agote. What is gravitational water? It is a type of dash water. Transport in plants kune pohise. Pohisa ne tumalke sobe transport in plants? So at least to some extent you all have revised, right? So transport in plants, we have to talk about, especially about water only, no? Water transport ami poru. So have you read something called as types of soil water? Types of soil water, the type of water that is present in the soil. It is not only one type of water that is present in the soil, right? We have 5 types of water that is present in the soil. And these 5 types, no, out of all these 5 types, it is only one type of water that is absorbed by the plants, and that is what is called as ki. Plants say kenuka pani absorb kore? Capillary water. Heard this word before? Plants bilake junto pani soil or loy, that water is called as what? Capillary. As no, it's not only capillary water that is present in the soil. Apart from that, we have something called as gravitational water. We have runaway water. We have chemically combined water, right? We have capillary water, etc., etc. Right? Runaway water, as the name suggests, no, borokhon dibo pani khini ki hobo tolle gusi jabo, right? And this runaway water can be absorbed, ne cannot be absorbed. It cannot be absorbed by the plants. Obviously it's a type of soil water, but the plants cannot take in. Similarly, we have something called as chemically combined water. Once the rain falls or once we water the soil, that water molecules goes and mixes up with the chemicals that are present inside the soil, and no longer it remains in the form of H2O. Combined with ekibo, no? So that is also a water that is not absorbed. Pure water junto form of plant cell oil, that is called as capillary. Why is it called as capillary? Because this is the water that is present in the capillary. What is capillary? The pores, right? Capillary mane ki futa futa, no? Capillary or pore, we are talking about, if suppose we are talking about soil particles like this, right? Soil particles bilakor major junkhini pore hoy, এই পৰখিনিক আমি কি বুলি কওঁ capillary, right? So we know particles would be present. Here we will see certain types of pores, but one point to be remembered is all types of pore cannot be considered as a capillary. In order to consider it as a capillary, tar eta specific diameter thakibo lagibo, right? It cannot be a huge one. If the pore is a huge one, that pore could not be taken it as a capillary, right? Ami capillary buli noko ar tat thaka pani khiniu ami capillary water buli noko. So a pore with a specific diameter, that is called as a capillary. That capillary having water, that water is called as capillary water, and that is the water that the plants take. So ekhine transport in plants, if you are going to revise it, we will do it again. As of now ki monot rakhiba, soil water buli kole we have 5 types of soil water. Out of the 5 types, it is only capillary water that is taken by the plants. Gravitational water we have written, right? So what is gravitational water? Again the same explanation. Borokhon hobo, along with gravity, some amount of water will go deep inside the earth and it cannot be used by the plants. That is what is called as gravitational water. Factors affecting decomposition likha first, chemical nature, this is something that we have already written, but this is in a more proper way. This is a point that we have already written, code decomposition, rapid decomposition and slow decomposition likhisilo. So this is the point. Next is according to soil pH, we have types of soil where we see the presence of more decomposers or less decomposers. So in case of acidic soil ki hoy, detritivores are less, so decomposition would be faster and slower. Yate? Obviously slower, right? So these are the factors that affects decomposition, just these 4 points. And finally, we'll write one line. Over. So this is all for today, right? So today what we have done in the classes, we have talked about the functional role of the ecosystem. We have talked about two major functions, productivity and decomposition, right? What is important in productivity, what is important in decomposition, we have already marked it. So we are left with just one part of the lesson, exactly 2 parts of the lesson. I mean, we have come to the end of the lesson. So maybe in the next class we are going to complete it. So what is left is we have to discuss about the nutrient cycles, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle upon discuss koribo, and next is ecological succession, right? I think you have heard about ecological succession, no? Pioneer in ecological succession in terrestrial area, ecological succession in aquatic area, etc. So this is a part for the next class. Another thing is, have everyone received the PDF? Second year receive course dropper batch PDF paisa na ecosystem or nai poa. So what we'll do is today the entire lesson or PDF pothai dim. Thik ase june june poa nai. It is not in fragments or parts, not like that. The entire lesson pothai dim. Entire lesson poar pisot what you do is last or junkhini nutrient cycles ase. Ami junkhini next class out korim. Hekini postu porhi ahiba and please bring the PDF to the class, because there is no point of wasting time. There is no point of drawing the nutrient cycle over here. Nitrogen cycle ma aki dibo nalage karon akar pora to question nahe, right? Carbon cycle to tumi aki thakibo nalage class. This is just wastage of time, right? So what you do, since you have the PDF, you have the notes, there is no point of drawing, writing it again in the class. So what we can do is, jedi sobore PDF ase, we can discuss it from the PDF and we can wind up the class. Will that be okay? right? There's no point কাৰণ carbon cycle বুলি ক'লে এটা huge diagram কিয় আঁকিব লাগে? No point, no? Especially dropper batch তো আৰু নালাগে. You don't have to draw, right? Phosphorus cycle, huge diagram. What is the point of drawing? So please take out that printout or you write it down in your copy. Next Monday, what you do is please bring the PDF along with you, right? Don't forget. আজি মই entire chapter দি দিম. So nutrient cycle or যিমানখিনি notes আছে আমি তাৰ পৰা কৰিম. Ecological succession also, since the note is something that you are going to have it, আমি points বিলাক বুজি পাই পেলাই next classত আমি এইটো chapter wind up কৰি দিম, right? কাৰণ fast অকমান যাবই লাগিব. Thank you.